It is August 16th, 2009, and it's the 250th anniversary of the beginning of the English Crown Point Road. This is an old road that went from the bottom of Lake Champlain to the Connecticut River. It's been 250 years that we white people have been walking it, but probably it was an old path before then. So we're not just celebrating the fact that we're walking on something that's been around here for as long as white history is. We're also celebrating the fact that there's been a path going through these mountains forever. You can see so far we started at Crown Point, and at this point we're about midway in Shrewsbury. And we will be continuing on in the next by another week to get down to the Connecticut River. It's the 250th anniversary of John Stark cutting the road and the English starting to use it. He started August 8th, 1759. And so we pretty much started on the same day. We've made it this far to Shrewsbury, and it's just been an amazingly wonderful trip. We've pretty much walked through the countryside of Vermont, meeting all sorts of really interested people in history. We let folks know we were coming, and since so many of our members live on the Crown Point Road, we kind of get to see them all, including like today in Shrewsbury, where we just met the whole Historical Society and spent time talking. We began our first day driving up into the fort at Crown Point, and Jim set all that up with Tom Hughes, and I was really skeptical, hoping that this would stay kind of a small, low-key event. And I drove over to the bridge to volleys and smoke, and I was going, oh no, like no one's going to know us. Where are we going to stay? And I'll let Jim take it from. He pretty much had it pretty wired.
Yeah. Once we got into the fort and past the battle, we were kind of ushered right in and told to park up on the hill with the other reenactors parked, and so I guess we did that and went down the visitor center. We met up with Tom Hughes, who is the director at the site at Crown Point, who also happens to be on our board of directors for the Crown Point Road Association, and we took in their nice new exhibit there at the historic site. I guess we took a tour of the fort itself, which is very impressive works, and I guess later that evening we pretty much got our tent site set up, and I guess this is where we went down to the lake. Jim had a swim, and we were sitting there talking, and we see this French bateau come out in the lake. And a minute or two later, there was some French or English sailors that kind of sneaking up behind us with a little cannon. So next thing we know, there's a little battle going on there. They were shooting at each other and hollering back and forth, which was quite exciting. So I guess later that evening, as we were sleeping out in the open in our sleeping bags and looking up at the sky, just amazed at how big everything seemed there. The sky was huge, and the moon is suddenly coming up, and it was very peaceful, and you could hear the French singing songs, and it was just a wonderful night there. And I guess the next morning we got packed up and drove across the Crown Point Bridge, and because we had to position vehicles there for our end of the day meeting point, so we could have a ride back to pick up our start point. But I don't know, Jim, you want to?
Yeah, first day was great. Again, I don't come from the Champlain Valley. Jim did, so I wasn't terribly looking forward to walking through the flat Champlain Valley. I have to admit, I couldn't wait to get up into the hills where we are now, and I was blown away. I've driven it all my life since I was a little kid riding, and it's just, I can see why Jim was in love with it, growing up there, because when you're all of a sudden walking through it, it just changes completely. We walked, Barry and Barb joined us. Hunter Melville was going to do the whole thing in 4 days. He was walking with them. Eileen Klein was with us. So that was our whole group. So we had a good group, six of us, wandering through these fields of wildflowers. A really soft day. There wasn't a blazing sun. It was almost a mist, and everything was like either green or colorful. I've just never seen the Champlain Valley like that. It was just so neat. We got to go cross lots. Jim knew all the farmers, and I mean, they were coming out, opening up their gates for us and walking their farms and, you know, showing us, you know, what they knew and telling old stories. It was really cool. And we had a lot of laughs because we had Barb and Barry, and there's no better walking company than Barb and Barry. We just had so much fun. I laughed more that day and all the days that they joined us because we just, I don't know, we just have a good time. End of that day, we ended up, it looked like it was going to be a vicious storm, and we ended up at Paul Sanger's, who runs Carillion Cruises. He was nice enough. He had a great big feedlot Quonset hut, and these guys were pretty brave. Jim and Eileen set up out in the field, and I was going, man, there's going to be a screamer thunderstorm. And I set my tent right up in this salt shed, and it was great because, I mean, I was just walking around in my bare feet in like this beautiful mushed up salt. And I don't know, but we did sit in there to eat and everything. There wasn't a mosquito around because that started the mosquito adventure. Because starting the very next day, we were in mosquitoes up to our ears, right down through. Let's see, that was first day. We woke up at Carl's and planted trucks up at Murray Hill and Shoreham, right?
Yeah, it was actually Murray Hill and Orwell.
In Orwell, rather. So that's why Jim's going to tell the next point, because he knows the difference between Orwell and Shoreham.
So once we left Sanger's place there on Cream Hill and Shoreham, we of course had to hike up or drive up to our start point. And we went to cross lots from North Cream Hill Road in Shoreham over to 22A, and then cross lots again from 22A to the Doolittle Road in Shoreham. Then it was pretty much all by road to get across the Lemon Fair River. Then we got to our next marker. We did some bushwhacking around the Pinnacle in Shoreham, which proved to be quite an experience. Just we had a compass course we wanted to follow, but it was quite difficult, just the way the terrain was and trying to dodge the patches of poison ivy and brush and whatnot. But I guess about 3 hours later, we got down to the next dirt road, which was the Butt-Off Road in Shoreham. And that was going to be another bushwhack over to the Canal Farm on the Richville Road, but it was getting late in the day, so we decided we better get back to our truck by walking the roads, which was probably about a 5-mile trip, I believe, which took a couple hours to get there. But it was a long, hot walk on that paved road, and I know my feet started getting a little bit sore at the end of that day, so I guess hiked the next day. We took off from, well, I guess I should back up. Our night was spent at Walter Phelps's place near Murray Hill in Orwell. It was a very pretty site, and he actually has an old house that he had restored, but we slept outside just because it was so hot inside the house. And that was the night we had a real heavy storm. Fortunately, there was no lightning involved with it.
Jim said, do we put flies over the tents? And it was like, nah, it's not going to rain.
So about 1 o'clock in the morning, we were putting the flies over.
You'll notice the flies go over the tent every night now, no matter what, because it's really hard in the dark when it's raining.
Fortunately, it wasn't raining hard when we had to put them over.
But what a view from up on that hill. We all of a sudden, we were coming out of the Champlain Valley, and we were just, the view of the range was spectacular, looking up and down Middlebury Gap, Brandon Gap, looking, as far down south as Killington and Pico. It was just, we woke up to that sunrise over the whole range, and it was just, and the mists were in the valleys, and it almost looked like there was gunfire. I mean, it was just such thick mist, and slowly it started lifting up and doing those wispy things. Really, I mean, some of the views, spectacular, exceeded our wildest expectations of views you get while you're hiking. Because a lot of times when you hike in Vermont, you're in the woods and you go for that one view at the end of the day or the 3 mountain peaks. But I mean, this is like constant. You're just going. And so that was that night. And the next day, what did we do?
The next day, we started out at marker 52, which is at a four corners in a back roads there on Whiting, what we call South Whiting School. So we walked south along West Road and came into the Vale
Who
Road.
joined us? Who were those? She was a granddaughter or granddaughter of the woman.
Yeah,
What's
that was the
family
Canal
name?
family.
Canal family.
Senecal family
Okay.
from Whiting there.
She and her two sons threw thick deer flies. Good sports. Walked with us for a couple of miles.
And they set the pace, and I think that was probably the fastest 2 miles yet.
Yeah. It's like, geez.
But we got down the end of Vale Road, in which sits the Vale House. So the gentleman that lives there we know pretty well, and we thought, well, it'd be a good opportunity to have a visit with him. So his vehicle was sitting in the driveway, so we knocked on the door, and he answered. We were invited in, and I don't know, we were probably there at least an hour, if not a little bit more.
It's a beautiful place to look around at.
Yeah.
A lot of history.
Yeah, it's a big brick house. I know they used to have Masonic meetings there, and it seems like it's a lot of the old furnishing is still there, dishes, you name it, portraits on the walls. It's a very pretty house. So we left there after our visit for an hour and a half or so, perhaps, and we continued eastward. We crossed Route 30, and we stopped at a small cemetery and went in and looked around in there for a few minutes and rested. And then we continued on over towards the Sudbury School, at which time it was another bushwhacking deal.
We were going to save a lot of time. This was a good bushwhack. The Crown Point Road went that way. It was shorter than today's road. This was cake. You know, we couldn't even miss it because we were going at a spear-pointed crossroads. I mean, you'd have to be an idiot to miss either road. I mean, compass course straight. And we've both been doing this for years.
But I think we,
You missed it?
well, with trying to get around the poison ivy,
Poison ivy up to here, I swear. I kept saying to Jim, just don't fall down. You know, it's like, and I don't know why you don't get poison ivy when you walk through it for 5 hours and then touch your pants, but we didn't. But,
we were very lucky.
it was, you know, so, I mean, you do get distracted. And I think that was it. Not to mention, you know, it's poison ivy to here and mosquitoes to here, which probably sounds unpleasant. But,
Yes.
you know, we were still enjoying ourselves.
And so I guess we ended up being about a mile off, so I guess that's pretty close.
Well, we walked in, we heard gunfire, and that makes me nervous anytime you're bushwhacking. It was like someone was, you know, not rapid fire, not crazy, but someone was playing with a gun out in the woods. And all of a sudden, we're bushwhacking. We're pretty sure where we are, which is where we weren't. And all of a sudden, you know, Jim looks up and says, you know, there's people up there, and this poor young couple that had got their hideaway in the middle of nowhere that no one's ever seen, you know, and two people like walk out of the woods and say, hey. And so I'm kind of looking around going, you know, like, I hope, you know, do they want people here? But they were neat. They were very supportive and told us how to get on their driveway back out to kind of where we started. And then we walked the rest on roads.
Yeah, we walked up. There was actually Fiddle Hill Road in Sudbury, so that was about a mile trip back up to where we wanted to get to.
Yep.
And then there was an abandoned town road that we walked downhill on to Willowbrook Road, and that ended our hike for that day. And I think the start of the mosquitoes actually they were pushing us down through the woods pretty good, I think. But yeah, and then camped out at what's called the Indian Spring a little further down the road there that night, and let you tell about that experience.
Just, again, really beautiful with mosquitoes being taken into account. I had to set up the tarp so that it was we able to get the truck up into a pasture through a fence and kind of set up the tarp, put a smudge fire at one end that the wind was blowing through so you could keep the tarp full. And then it was pretty pleasant. You know, there was hardly any mosquitoes in there. Hard to breathe, but no mosquitoes. After you get the feeling that you're in this place, you're saying, well, maybe the mosquitoes have calmed down, so I decided to get up to Indian Spring, and I didn't have my boots on because I've been trying to go barefoot at the end of the day. It's just to toughen up and dry out my feet. And so I kind of started up, and it's good for a few minutes because I was probably so smoky that they didn't touch me. And I got just far enough away that I really wanted to get there that it was like, holy cow, and I ran and stayed ahead of them. and managed to get to Indian Spring, then ran like hell back down. Probably the whole trip of taking 15 minutes going, yep, Indian Spring, great, and back down, and had a night of coyote and barred owl serenading. It was just a wonderfully wild night. And then we picked up the next day through going down Willowbrook Road, Willowbrook Cemetery, wandering through pretty much just skirting the Brandon Swamp. At that point, deciding not to do a few bushwhacks that we could have because they would put us that much closer to the Brandon Swamp, which is flooded right now. We had such tremendous rains early in the summer. So we walked existing roads, but very back roads, and close to the Crown Point Road. And finished up that day. God, where was that? Oh, finished up that day at Hammond Bridge in Pittsburgh. So that was a pretty good day. That was 9, long day. Brooke joined us that day. Brooke Aldrich, and humped right along in full reenactor gear and a big black hat and a tomahawk and carrying a musket in his 60s. I was really impressed, and didn't sit down when I did. And Hammond Bridge the next day, Barb can tell because Barb met us the next morning. We stayed at my house for Hammond Bridge because it was so close and it was a good overnight campsite. And the next day, Barb met us to do the walk, again, skirting Pittsford Brandon near the swamps. And it was a pretty exciting day. Remember it?
I do. There was Brooke and Jim, and Jim met us there. And AJ.
AJ Morrow came to do some shots.
To shot some pictures by the bridge.
Yep.
And then we headed, was that West Road?
I think by then you're on Crick Road still, or Florence Road almost.
Is it Florence
before
Road?
now, yeah, we got right up in
Went
Florence.
by the pond that feeds into Stevens Brook.
Yeah.
And we headed south all day. Again, very pretty.
Stopped at
Through farmlands.
Yeah, what did we stop? That's where we
the
stopped at the
Split
cemetery.
Rock.
Well, it's the big landscape that got us interested in the ground penetrating radar project we did. So we got to go to an incredible glacial erratic that's just massive boulders the size of houses, and got to show Barb because Barb had never visited the site, and Jim and I had helped set up the grid marks for when they came in to look for the old cemetery. We don't have data back yet, but it looks like in this pasture there is a very old cemetery, and we'll find out more later on in the summer. And then Barb had the most fun part of the day when we broke into our bushwhack section, because there was only it wasn't very long. We were trying to follow the Crown Point Road close.
And we're on the Market Road.
We went on the Market Road first, yeah.
On the Market Road, and then we went out, and I met my first mosquitoes really of the day. I had heard a lot about them, and partway in when we decided to have lunch, these guys, Brooke and Jim and I, got our matches and our birch bark and our wet leaves, and we had a smudge pot going to keep the mosquitoes away while we ate. Went to Roger Stevens' cellar hole, Widow Mays.
Maybe Widow Mays cellar. Yeah.
And then the Indian Shelter Rock, which is also headed south towards Jim's house and ended up at Jim's house. It was a good day, except for the mosquitoes. They were awful.
Yeah, they were breathable that day. You didn't want to breathe with your mouth open. If you got out of breath, you tried to do it through your nose, and sometimes that didn't work. That was our breaking point. We actually took a day off. Everyone went back to their respective homes and rested their feet. And we commenced yesterday. And again, Barry and Barb, Barb joining us in the morning, Barry double teaming, coming in the afternoon, had lunch with us. And we walked down basically from Proctor, walking down West Proctor Road, still really close to Otter Creek. But again, if you're out in the sun walking, it was hot, but not too unpleasant. The miles just flying away. Almost everyone's experience as we set up trucks in the morning is, oh brother, like we're gonna walk this far? It's inconceivable that as you get all your vehicles, you know, the first days I was really skeptical, and as time went on, you just told yourself, don't worry, you know, this is, and the miles fly by. Not just because when you put one foot in front of the other, you get somewhere. It's because we're walking along with 3 and 4 and 5 people and just talking. Whereas usually trail walking, you don't get 2 abreast. You never get 3 abreast. But as we noticed today, you can have 5 abreast some days if the roads are quiet. And the conversations, you know, before you know it, you say, wow, we're here. Wow, we're here. And, you know, before you know it, you just walk half of Vermont away, and it's just been a hoot.
Well, we're discussing, we would have been in, the troops would have been in forests.
Yeah.
They probably wouldn't have seen the mountain ranges.
No, it would have been a
Yes,
different
it would.
experience. Yeah. Yeah, it would have been, you know, in those days, a deep. And of course, we've been talking about, you know, this celebrates the 205th anniversary of Stark blazing and marking the trail. But I mean, people have lived here for a really long time. The argument being from 10 to 40,000 years of people living in this area. And I think it would be pretty hard to believe that people living in a place that wouldn't have noticed this normal route from Lake Champlain that follows up Otter Creek to the end of its drainage, well, almost the end, crosses over the easiest gap in the Green Mountains, which we could notice from miles back. All of a sudden you have Green Mountains, Green Mountains, Green Mountains, and it goes to this amazing flat spot, which we walked up through today.
Avoids the falls.
Yeah.
And avoids all the major waterfalls, gets across the major rivers without a big hard time, and then gets up here. So, you know, we're not just celebrating Stark marking and doing the road in English history, we're celebrating that this has been a footpath for eons, and a really beautiful footpath. And that brought us to yesterday, finishing up, we walked Crick Road, Proctor, to the Reedenauer's house in Clarendon, North Clarendon, right?
Clarendon.
North Clarendon. Again, you know, again getting greeted, you know, and treated like royalty, and talking history at night, and just, you know, way too much fun for 2 people to be having. The mosquitoes again were thick, but you know, once you're out in them a couple days, it just becomes a non-issue.
You become one
You
with
learn how to. You
mosquitoes.
become one with the mosquito. And after they came out and joined us for dinner, and you know, brought us just most amazing salad, and Jim had some bratwurst repeatedly. Anyway, a beautiful night. I went for a dip in their Springfield pond. It was one of those where you jump in, and I thought I was going to go swimming, and it's like I couldn't turn around fast enough. It was like I did it 3 times though. I mean, you kept saying I can do that farther, and I'd go in, and it's like and back out. It was really fun. And we woke this morning to a wonderful large group again. Barry and Barb joined us. Brooke came back. Who else was there this morning?
Tim
Snyder.
Snyder from
Brand
Shrewsbury.
new, Tim visited from Shrewsbury.
He read about it and wanted to join us today.
Marita Johnson.
And Marita, which was a real surprise, pulled in just as we were taking off, found us, and we walked with someone else. Barry, you were with us all day.
Yes, I was, and we dipped down a little bit south of where the Crown Point Road may have gone, although probably by 1800 or so, the road we went was a fair approximation.
We're here on Crick Road in Clarendon already, right? We're over the line.
Yep.
Beautiful day, August 16th, Bennington Battle Day, which is
Right.
a real special day in Vermont. We're going to be today leaving the lowlands that we've been in for days, walking through the Brandon Swamp, eating mosquitoes, and we're going to climb into the hills. And already this morning in placing trucks we found there were no mosquitoes, or just like 50 around your head, not like any numbers. And so what we're doing a little bit of cheating today just for convenience sake. Pretty sure the Crown Point Road would have been going out on 103, so there will be a part of 103 we're not going to do. We're going to take a cut up the Mill River, which is a beautiful road that gets rid of us walking a very busy highway. Otherwise, we're on it. We're on it right here. It's over there, and it's over there, and it very well could have been right here too. Just you know, the Crown Point Road moving according to how muddy and how the next guy that came along said, you know, that's crazy. Why are they going through the swamp? We're moving it higher. So we're going to continue down Crick Road. We're going to turn on Walker Mountain Road.
Wandering for days.
We're going to stop and look at what, I could be wrong, I'm wrong a lot, that I think is the Great Bridge. I don't think the Great Bridge would be up where it's the creek is really, there's a great ford where we're going to look at, but there's a wonderful abutment down here we're going to sneak into and take a look at. Go up through the Clarendon, cross Route 7, walk up the Mill River, cross 103, follow the long trail until we hit the Crown Point Road actually again, bushwhack up to Lincoln Hill, and within what, 2 miles past where we come out on Lincoln Hill Road, we're going to walk to the farm for our ending route.
Which is where Lemuel White's Tavern was in 1776.
And
at a stopping point.
this is a neat day.
Yeah.
This is really a pretty day. As beautiful as the valley is, it'll be really fun to gain a little elevation. I say that now, and at noon I may be singing a different tune. Anyway, that's the plan.
Have you on film anyway.
Yeah, right. Everything's fine. Right now, we're about here. You can see Otter Creek running down. We've been following Otter Creek for a really long time. We're walking down to Walker Mountain Road. Going down through, getting on Middle Road right here. The abutment I wanted to show you is right there, so we'll be, dropping packs and going and looking at that. Then we walk through the village of Clarendon, cross Route 7, up this Mill River Road, which takes us over onto this map. Going up, kind of hit Airport Road for a minute. Come on to 103 for a short but very breezy walk next to a lot of traffic. Cut up on the old long trail and across where we'll be on the original Crown Point really nicely. Come out on Lincoln Hill and up to our farm, Storrow's, right? Sharrow's. I always say Storrow. The Sharrow's farm up on the hill.
Thanks for the maple syrup. The commemorative glass is beautiful.
Isn't that cool?
Absolutely beautiful.
Yeah.
This is our biggest group, right?
Glad you guys
Oh, wow.
didn't get eaten up by anything last night. That would be embarrassing.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.
You can smell the hay. I love that. All of a sudden you get a drift. Sweet hay.
And what a view.
Well, and there's our gap. If you look,
Where?
this is a path as old as paths get. So we've been following down the Otter Creek drainage, and these are all the green mountains. But look, all of a sudden there's no green mountains.
Oh, and that's where we're headed?
yeah.
Right over there.
Yeah, so it. We talk about General Stark cutting the trail 250 years ago, but I think Stark got an assignment, and it was like, great, they want us to build a road where this 10,000-year-old road is.
And where did you find that?
It was like by our garden right out back here. I don't know if that's...
Feeding a garden up.
Yeah.
You see, I found one up in Orwell that was pretty similar to that.
Oh, yeah?
What is it? Do we know?
Yeah, do we?
It would have been a small gun.
Oh, yeah?
mean-
Oh, cool.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's a big piece of shot.
Yeah.
Yeah, at first I thought it was a bearing or something.
Get hit with that.
Yeah.
That's the real thing.
Go through your door.
Yeah.
What do you think, Brooke?
No idea.
Well, what size?
I wouldn't think it'd been made out of iron to be that size, because that'd be like a wall gun size. Yeah. And they still would have been lead.
So what do you
But
think
it-
that is? Iron?
That's iron.
Iron.
Yeah.
Cannonball out back. Picked it up and
Along the same line,
Right, yes,
pretty
yeah.
much right behind. And that track goes right up. We stayed at the reading hours last night. Right behind
did?
it. Oh, it's nice.
Oh, okay.
Crown Point Road moved. The early roads, if it got swampy, it moved it.
Exactly.
It appears that it was here, but also as it got wetter, probably got behind
Yeah, I think it trails over that little
It's
ridge there.
discontinued.
I know there is a little road here between, my brother owns the farm, 2 doors down, and so there's always been a road there.
Oh, he's refurbished that so beautifully.
Oh,
This one right
yeah,
here,
yeah,
the wraparound.
And there's stone bridge abutments that are very old, and nobody knows of a road ever going across the creek and across those meadows.
So it was probably the Crown
Could have been,
Point.
but historically we have it. We're going to show you on probably your next shot. where we call the Great Bridge site. We're going to cross the Otter Creek where they consider the Great Bridge
Oh,
site.
so
it's
that
one of
really
those.
is-
I like this one. If I had to build a bridge, you don't build it so it's 80 feet across. You build it so it's 20. So we're guessing, as always, just saying, you know, again, maybe both places had a bridge.
Now, we just
Maybe-
got to point out that little ball that they found. I mean, if they
It was-
crossed the creek there and went right up through.
That's right. Now, you know, things
Oh.
like that little ball we just
Yeah.
saw it starts to pull the road this way to that one. You know, I mean, because during the Revolutionary War, they weren't carrying those, were they?
But they were transporting materials, so why wouldn't they have been transporting wall guns?
Yeah, so maybe. Yeah.
We're looking at Round Hill, and behind that is Mendon to the right and Pico over to the left. One of the New York towns that was going to be laid out was Social Bureau, which was surveyed by Will Cockburn, and part of what we know about the Crown Point Road was from Cockburn's early survey. The southeastern corner of Social Bureau was on Round Hill, and there is a cairn of stones there marking the old southwestern corner. I've not been there, but you have, Jim.
Yep, it's there.
Yep.
Still a great big pile that they built a long time ago.
The Great Bridge that went across is probably, we figure anyway, went about where that boulder is in the creek down there, and if you paddle through them, will be a kayak or canoe, and you get in that area, it's even more shallow. So we even questioned at one point if there could have been a ford in that area.
When they built the road in 1759, most likely they just went across a ford on Otter Creek, near where Riedenauer's was, but probably it wasn't very long after that when they were building bridges, and there are a couple of possible bridge sites and abutment sites for the old Great Bridge, I guess, down through the Clarendon Flats area where we hiked.
This is the village of Clarendon, or Clarendon Flats, they call it. We're later going to be walking up Mill River, which flows down from Shrewsbury and comes in here. And there are some, I have some references from 1773
They'd be good ones to ask about getting into the meadow.
log of taverns along the Crown Point Road, and they listed a tavern in this area. Elaine Purdy tells me it was along this area near Mill River, which is not too far from here. So at least in 1773, the road may have been passing down this way to get to that tavern.
That's good to know.
Elaine Purdy greeted us there in the flats, and we got a picture of her at the cemetery, and she's been great with this group. She's been checking in with her every day and giving us encouragement and keeping us posted, and everybody else posted that's interested.
Smile again.
Hey, wait a minute, I got my camera.
That's all I have to do is point and click.
This is the Clarendon Flats Cemetery, and I'm a member of the Ann Story chapter of DAR. And in the spring, we come around to all the cemeteries in the area, puts new flags on all of the Revolutionary War markers in the cemeteries. And this is one of them. This is in memory of James Harrington, by the looks.
And he died December 9th, 1809.
79 years old. 79 years of his age.
Barry.
Oh, here he comes.
Oh, here he comes. At least I'm not the last one. Right?
Yes, it does.
Those are the Green Mountains.
Yeah.
Route 7. And we're going up there.
Not having, yeah, it's safe. Everybody walk across and we'd all be wiped out at once.
Like a classroom of kids.
Yeah, exactly.
So Jim, right in here, there's a swimming hole too? Or?
All the way up through the most amazing swimming holes. That's what we all did when we were kids. Just talking to Barb, I asked her, I didn't even tell Heather about it. She was, all of a sudden, senior year, she said, Dad, we found the neatest place to swim. I said, oh yeah, where? She goes, I don't know the name of the river, but they call it the Gorge. And it's like, oh, no.
From there, we wandered across Route 7, took our lives in our hands, but made it across safely, and then the Gorge Road, which runs along Mill River. Mill River runs through Shrewsbury and then dumps into Otter Creek, about where we came through, and that we chose that because it is an old road, and it was in the shade. It was dirt rather than tar, and we had a glorious time. Ended up and had lunch at the Kingsley grist mill. There's an old covered bridge there. It was built in the 1830s or thereabouts.
Beautiful covered bridge.
Yeah, and the bridge itself, I think, and the grist mill itself, I think, was built by Powers. It's a very famous bridge builder, Powers, who built a lot of covered bridges, but he actually also built that grist mill, which is called the Kingsley grist mill. Kingsley was an early settler in that spot. Followed up the old Route 103, managed to shunt a little bit to avoid the new Route 103. And,
We're in
in the pass.
We're in
the
We're on Route 103 in Shrewsbury. We're at the foot of what is known as Gaynor Road or Oliver Road, an old town highway that was abandoned after the flood of 1927. The Crown Point Road passed near here. We're going to go up this road. This marker is marker 38, set by the Crown Point Road Association in 1984. It reads Crown Point Road, built in 1759, 1760. Is 3/8 of the mile east of here to marker 37, where we're heading next.
And right up this road.
The original long trail went up through here, For many years, they relocated it a little bit further to the west here.
Walked up the Gaynor Road, just amazing road. You got a lot of beautiful shots of the Gaynor Road. Again, not exactly right on the Crown Point Road, but within a short time we were up crossing it again and getting back on it. Okay, well, first of all, we're just, this actual little piece right here, we're gonna cross the Crown Point Road up here. So this really steep part you walked up, we don't worry about the guys carrying it. But, you know, the whole point of the Crown Point Road, the British had 13,000 guys at Crown Point. And when you think of the size of America in 1759, I don't know if there were any 13,000 population in cities then. So, you know, Crown Point had just an amazing amount of people. Amherst needed to feed them. So, I mean, the first thing was that they could easily get their cattle from Fort Number 4 across. I mean, so the first way the road was used is to herd big groups of cattle up to feed these 13,000 guys. Certainly, I'm sure they hauled military weapons and things, but, you know, not so much. This was a food route to supply the troops that were going to get the French out of Quebec, and it worked. Even the French out of, you know, northern Vermont, northern New York at that time.
Well, we've just ascended a section of the old Shrewsbury abandoned town road, the town called the Gaynor Road or the Oliver Road. We think the stretch we just walked was also part of the original 1759 Crown Point Road. And one of the reasons we think that is because in 1759, after Amherst had cut the original and blazed the original trail in August, Amherst sent out Major Hawks, and he instructed Hawks to improve the road and also to set out cattle pens every 15 miles. The reason being that in addition to getting men to Crown Point, the road was intended to get meat on the hoof, oxen, to Crown Point. And so we believe that Hawks did as instructed. One of the things Al Ransom made it his business to do was to try to locate potential cattle pen sites along the road, and Al determined that the site behind this sign was the remains of a cattle pen which was erected by Hawks in 1759. Once they were done, there were 5 droves of cattle brought over this road to Crown Point to feed the men. This tree had grown up in it, and again, it's for the untrained eye, it's hard to discern. These would have been built with some rocks below and then with sticks and such sticking up out of them to try to keep the cattle inside. And again, it was Al who did the research who thought that this was a very probable cattle pen site.
So we're 15 miles approximately from the cattle pen site we saw yesterday morning on the beginning of our...
Yep. Yes. The group yesterday coming out of Proctor passed another possible cattle pen site, which was probably about 15 miles from here, maybe a little more.
I'm guessing this is a couple of rods. A rod is about 16 and a half feet, so this looks like about a 2-rod road between the stone walls. This wouldn't have been built in 1759, but this was a town road built in 1820, I believe, and so probably over the next century or so, these stone walls would have been put up as part of that town road that was abandoned after the flood in 1927. It was built from the Oliver Farm, which is on what they call the Lottery Road, north of here, uphill from here, and it was commissioned in 1820, and what we think it did was come down this far and then join up with the Crown Point Road, which already had been walked, at least if not laid out by the town. So this section here, if you look at a map, you can see that there's a fairly sharp bend in the road from coming from the north, which was the later built road, to where it heads more east and west, as the Crown Point Road would have done, heading to Clarendon, where we just came from.
So this is the Crown Point
So
Road.
this, as near as we can tell, this is we believe this stretch we're on right now is part of the 1759 Crown Point Road. As nearly as we can tell. Well, for the last half mile we've been on something that looks like a road. For the next half mile we're going to be going where we think the road went, but it doesn't look anything like a road today. So.
Where are we cutting across?
We're going to cut right up here.
As a puppy, well, small enough to be on my father's shoulders, this was the Long Trail, so we came up the Long Trail often to Clarendon Shelter, which was a full shelter then. So in the winter you'd come up and make a fire in the wood stove and warm it up and snowshoe and everything. Anyway, as I can remember, it was a summer hike then. And being on his shoulders, and the old Crown Point Road sign was a hand-painted one, like the pressure-treated one you just saw, and it gave the history that this is where the road crossed. And that's my first memory of the Crown Point Road, is looking at that. And the joy is I got to that sign that had been destroyed, and I got to make the second one.
What are you doing?
I'm following we're heading off in the woods.
Yeah, you follow him. Let's go up a little ways, Barb. You're right.
According to my GPS, 371 feet this way is something.
Yeah, you are. Well, you're going to hit the little brook.
The Crown Point Road Association was formed in 1959, and this section through here was marked in the 1960s, and there are several old markers which are here even today. We've walked through here and have noted a couple of those along the way. I've noted a few on my GPS, and I'm going to see if we can find them out here in the woods.
Discovery.
Yeah. For all these years, they're still out here.
A bushwhack, which the last few days has just put terror and fear in our eyes, and we did a bushwhack, and I didn't see a mosquito, and I didn't see any poison ivy. So I could have lived there. It was just a beautiful patch, and of course this is a little cross section that just has been marked a long time, and so it's really wonderful to see old CPR people that have been in there, and their old wooden signs are still up there. I mean, we're not just tracing history, we have our own history in the Crown Point Road Association, so it's really touching to see some of the people that aren't here anymore see their work. Their signs are still there, their cuts in the wood, their hand-painted signs, their tacks to the trees, and I mean, this is an ongoing thing that somehow every generation seems to get this bug about following this old path through Vermont, and that's always really special for me to see, like a nasty old sign that you almost miss, just crackled with hardly any paint, and there it is, tacked to a pine tree, and it's been there for 50 years. That someone else thought it was worth it to be out in the woods marking the Crown Point Road. This is one of the old, probably this one has lasted 50 years almost from when they first did a lot of the marking, when town historians went through and really looked for the Crown Point Road and gathered all the old information, and this one somehow is weathered better than the other 3 or 4 that were in here, and just has some beautiful patina, doesn't it?
It's a little wobbly, isn't it?
It is, yeah. Nothing you want to touch right now. And we said we should probably put a new post. I'd love to save the. This is the last. Well, no, there's another one with no lettering on it. That's worse, but
That's true.
Since we don't get in here a lot.
And while this is placed here, what we
what we have actually found is the gap in a stone wall, which is about a few hundred feet that direction, which is probably where the road
Well, and if you read the
crossed.
marker book, it will say that
Yeah.
this marker is at the gap in the stone wall, and as you can see, there's no gap, but if you look down where that tree is and a little bit past it, it's a big swampy area, and that's where the gap in the stone wall is. And at some point, someone just moved the sign up, so.
Because it's a lot easier to walk up here.
Yes,
I was gonna say,
yes,
you guys-
yes,
Yeah,
right?
for those of us that didn't follow Barry,
That's right.
we're realizing.
Those of you
we've
that
got
followed
to
Barb
reach
realize
water.
that we've arrived now at what's known as Great Brook. And I think the road crossed here. Again, this is one of those markers from the early 1960s that was set out, as well as one across the brook you can see there. So we know we're following the markers, and the markers appear to set out the road.
So the Great Brook.
The Great Brook.
Goes quite a ways down there. Good place for cattle to get their water.
Again, this is another of the markers that was set out by the Crown Point Road Association shortly after it was founded 50 years ago. We'll see a few more of them along our way here.
And not much evidence of a road here.
That's right. We're following these markers, which are really, it's very hard to see a trace of a road, but it was 250 years ago.
Here I come, the last one. Up through the brook. Up through the brook. Crown Point Road. I don't think I'd have made it 250 years ago.
Oh, this is probably a road that they have thrown up, huh?
Yeah, we're going through a break in a stone wall here, but I think this is probably a road of more of a logging road of more recent.
It's tough work looking for those
Yeah,
signs.
it is. Put these up for us.
It's really special. It is, and I wonder what that dates to, the 50s or the 60s?
Well, the association was formed in 1959, and we know the Hollanders led a hike through here in 1964. So my thinking is that this probably dates back to around 1964 when the Hollanders were marking
years?
this out.
Is
45
that
years
right?
ago, yep.
45? Is that
Yep.
what it is? 45 years.
Still here.
And we came out on Lincoln Hill Road and sat there for a while.
Yeah, and then we sat at one of the old markers.
This was one of the originals. Again, we looked at that beautiful one with patina painted on, and this was probably the next generation, maybe a few years after those painted ones. And they used the aluminum letters. We saw some of those as we just walked through. And I think these were getting pretty rough, and Al, I want to say 10 years ago, but it could have been longer, asked me if we'd clean up and make a few new ones. And so this is of the same generation as the cattle pen one that you took a picture of a few minutes ago.
I will read from the marker book. This is Vermont number 35, Shrewsbury. The wooden marker, a square post marked CPR, stands on the north side of the so-called Lincoln Hill Road, town road beginning 6/10 of a mile southeast of a point where the long trail and the Rutland Railroad cross Route 103 and extending easterly 2.6 miles to Shrewsbury Center. The marker location is 1.8 miles west of the town hall at Shrewsbury Center and 0.8 of a mile east of Route 103.
And this road right down here is which road?
This would be Lincoln Hill Road here.
That you get to from where?
103.
You
and
come
it runs
up.
up to Shrewsbury Center.
We had some trail magic. George and Nancy Smith from Heartland, who are friends of the road, couldn't join us for the whole hike, but they greeted us as we came out of the woods with some nice ice-cold water, which was a great treat. And George hiked with us the last mile or so to the Sharrow Farm, Pine Valley Farm on Lincoln Hill, which was the site of the 1776 tavern of Lemuel Smith.
The Crown Point Road, 1759 to 1760. This marker was placed by the Ann Story Chapter, DAR, and the Crown Point Road Association, June 14th, 1994. We were at marker 35. We started at marker 64 a week ago today.
We were greeted there by members of the Shrewsbury Historical Society who had contacted me earlier. They read about it and wanted to do something for the group coming through, and that was just a very fine social event. We got there, we met them around 3. We had time to get in, and it was a great conversation. You guys had some of the chats as well.
It was, it's what we've been hitting all along. I mean, the people you meet, in Vermont, history is a second religion to a lot of people. And sitting around that, you've got some films of some of these people. I was listening and talking, but I was hearing all the other conversations, and I wanted to be part of all of them because they were all really cool. And all the way along the way, I mean, just people have such wonderful stories and cautionary tales and just wonderful stuff of Vermont history. And more than a walk, that's what this has been. Everywhere you go, we're meeting. I mean, can you imagine coming up on a farm and all these people came out on a Sunday night and just to say hi and exchange stories and talk about the Crown Point Road. We had a reenactor, Chris Fitch, who worked at number 4 forever, actually came all the way over, and I think he lives in Wyndham, just to make contact, say hi. It's just a wonderful spirit. It's an awful lot of fun.
Crown Point Road, except that General Amherst was a stiff guy, general, and he took his sword across the map and says, I want the road right there. No ands, ifs, and buts.
And luckily, it was already there, so that's why Stark said, "Oh, okay, we can do that."
This is the end of the day on August 16th of the Crown Point Road hike. We are on the Crown Point Road in Shrewsbury, and this is an appropriate place to stop. This was the settlement of the first settler in Shrewsbury, Lemuel White, who settled here either in 1776 or 1777. He had a tavern on this lot, maybe not in this exact spot, while during 1776. The second settler of Vermont was Nehemiah Smith, who settled here just across the road on lot number 4 in 1780. And this farm has been in the Smith family since 1780, going on 250 years or so. They're farmers, so they're busy working even though it's Sunday. We're here on lot number 1, settled by Lemuel White, either in 1776 or 1777. The second settlers in town were Nehemiah Smith and his sons, who settled here in 1780. And Julianne Smith Sharrow lives here now, so the family has been here for generations. One of the old histories of this county had the following quote in it, that the Smith family were glad of the shelter afforded by a great rock on their lot until they had erected their house, their log house. Then, while they were clearing a space for cultivation and waiting for the grain to ripen, they subsisted solely by making potash and burning charcoal, which they carried to Troy, New York, 75 miles distance, on horseback, and which they exchanged for grain. So those were certainly hard days. Again, we're talking 1780 now on the Crown Point Road.
And that brought us. Jim and I got, and I think who went with us?
To finish the walk,
right? The Smiths, George Smith and his wife Nancy went up to the meeting house because we've been on schedule. We've stayed on a really good schedule, and we want to start from the meeting house tomorrow morning. So we got up to the top, and we're done for the day, and we're done. We've made it. And you were saying this is almost as, the meeting house is almost as high as you get. Is that pretty true, you think, with your feeling?
Yeah, between here and Kyle Perry's. That's.
Do we gain? Not much.
Not much.
Yeah.
It's about, I think Kyle's is about where the height of land, where the watershed goes.
So when you
You have to climb a kingdom from this kingdom.
Well, but you're
over the main. You've gone down again.
Yeah.
You're over the main Green Mountains,
getting
which
into the
just gives us a feeling what an easy pass this is, and how this, of course, has been the way people cross the Green Mountains forever. That we're trying to quickly get over to the Connecticut River Valley. That today we walked up the pass,
and it wasn't a bad climb.
And you didn't say, "Oh my God!" It was just a very nice, gentle climb, and you made it to the top. And from here on out, tomorrow night we go to what is considered halfway encampment at Kyle Perry's house, and then we go over down into the Plymouth Lakes, climb up through Plymouth Kingdom, into Cavendish, and Weathersfield, and before we know it, we're in Springfield and at the Connecticut River. But I know you'll catch up with us again before then, and we'll have some probably better stories, and they won't include mosquitoes. I hope.
Windsor County mosquitoes. Good morning. It's Monday morning, August 17th, 2009. And the Crown Point Road through hikers are convening here in Shrewsbury Center at the meeting house where the through hikers ended the day yesterday. And we're going to head from here today to the halfway encampment now on the Kyle Perry farm in Mount Holly. The meeting house and Shrewsbury Center are part of the old Crown Point Road. We think probably the original road passed just a little bit to the south of here. There's an old cemetery below us to the south with several Revolutionary War graves and some of the first settlers of Shrewsbury, including Lemuel White, are buried there. By 40 years later, we talk about the road moving. It was fairly clear that the road had moved a little bit to the north, and along this line the road that we'll be starting out on today. If you continue to the east, that's called the Crown Point Road. And we'll take a look at that. If you remember, the 1759 road kind of went down Route 103. By the time of the American Revolution, it went up over the ponds, but then it went back down to the encampment, and then it came back up again. And in the decades after that, people said, heck with all this up and down, let's just cut across due east. And so that's the road that you see here today that we're going to start out on. We'll be heading out what's known in Shrewsbury as the Russellville Road, which then turns once across Freeman Brook to the Frank Lord Road, and then we'll continue into Mount Holly, where I think it's again known as the Russellville Road. And we're heading down toward, I believe it's Hortonville is the name of the little village. We'll probably cut a corner along the power line just to save a little bit, depending on how we feel and how the sun is and how the bushes are. So that's the introduction for today, I think. So we came into Shrewsbury, ending at Shrewsbury Center yesterday. We are going to be heading out the Russellville Road, the Frank Lord Road, ending up at the halfway encampment, which is just off this map. This is the halfway encampment. Walking out of Shrewsbury Center now, we started down the Russellville Road, which is a pretty fair approximation of the 1759 road, we believe. We actually think the original road went a little bit to the south of the present Shrewsbury Center, perhaps along that tree and stone wall there. Further to the west is the cemetery I referred to earlier. There's a break in the stone wall on the downhill, the southern side of that cemetery, and an educated guess is that was where the original road went down to Lemuel White's. It got relocated a little bit further to the north in the years after that. We talked earlier about how the road had changed in its location over the years. A few years back, while I was doing some research, I found a book called The History of Russellville, Vermont, and it related how the original Russell was born on the Crown Point Road in 1800, so I looked up where that was and discovered it wasn't on this road and said, what's going on? And then that was what led me to realize that the road had actually moved, and he settled on top of the mountain over to our left here, and the road essentially was moved to go by his house and another settlement that was a little also on the other side of that ridge there. There's a story about how in the winter of when he moved up here, he was 18 or 19, he had a bride down in eastern Massachusetts, and he set out in the winter. He got terribly lonely and heartsick, and he set out on his sleigh to try to make it to Boston, and he traveled all day on his sled and only made it about 2 miles and realized he wasn't going to make it to Boston at that rate, so he went back to his house and cried and cried and cried until the spring he went back and collected her. So,
You had to make it through a Vermont winter.
that's right, yeah, it had to be lonely. And he was young and lonely. And the next generation of Russells moved down the hill a little more, and then the grandson actually had a mill on Freeman Brook in what they call Russellville now, and eventually the road, which is called Crown Point Road here, essentially abandoned the east-west route over the mountain and dips down into the mill site. So originally they went over the mountain to straighten it out, and then eventually they abandoned that straight route and looped back down to the mill site.
So we're headed south.
Like the parade route.
Once again at the end, Marita brings up the tail.
Wrath or sword, mighty swift sword. Well, here's a good trivia question. The song I was just singing, Glory, Glory, Hallelujah. And of course to the same tune, John Brown's Body. John Brown's body lies a molding in the grave. Glory, glory, hallelujah. Now, which came first? Same tune. Did they steal it? Glory, glory, hallelujah. Or I think the Battle Helmet of the Republic hidden John Brown's body. Yeah. That's what all the Union troops were singing. And then someone said, we got to put some way better.
What kind of apples, Barb? They're huge. They're beautiful red.
There's two different trees there. There's a
Really?
crab apple and then there's a regular apple. Can you see the green apples up there?
Oh yeah.
If they grafted.
I don't know.
Those are bigger crab apples than I. They almost look like
You know, there
real
are some
kind.
people.
Look at this. This is really a section of the old road. You know, some of these old maples, just look at the way they lean this way, lean that way, shade the road. Every color green. Really pretty morning.
There is supposedly a big rock which, well, going back to after the Crown Point Road was settled and the French and Indian War was over, various towns were established and surveyors were sent out to try to set the town boundaries. There were 2 or 3 surveyors that were trying to establish the boundary between Wallingford to the south and Shrewsbury, and I guess, well, Mount Holly wasn't around in those days. It was Ludlow.
Saltash.
Saltash, thank you. And supposedly there's a rock out here. Remember Baker was one of the surveyors, right, Jim?
Yeah.
And
Munn, maybe? Was that something?
yeah, the only one I remember is Remember Baker because he was a Green Mountain boy. And when we're about 2 miles out of the Shrewsbury Center now. When we get down a little further, there's a marker that the Crown Point Road set out a few years ago. And the reason it was set here, and we know that we're fairly close to the Crown Point Road here, is because one or more of their surveys said we passed the Crown Point Road so many miles from here, or so many chains and links from here. So that's one of the reasons we know this was where the road went in 1759.
This is a great road here.
Yeah.
Coming down, there was something they called the slanting bridge down here that crossed Freeman Brook that we'll descend to. We have a nice view here to the east. That is Saltash Mountain, the tallest one, and to the left of it is Bear Mountain, one of many Bear Mountains in Vermont, but that's the one on the Shrewsbury-Plymouth line. The name of Plymouth was originally, the name of the town was Saltash, so it probably is named for the fact that it was from the town, and they did, as they were clearing these trees, they did make things like potash and saltash out of them. There was in the 1980s an extensive maple syruping operation on saltash, so there are some old trails up there, and there's a nice view of Lake Nineveh from the top.
The slaves that escaped and had their own. They had their own societies, and that's what she studied. It's very
Okay. We talked earlier about how the original settler Russell, he lived at the top of that hill right there, and in around 1800, a road, which was a variation of the Crown Point Road, essentially passed over that ridge down into Shrewsbury Center where we started. The second generation built a house down a little bit, and that's the one we can see here. It's still around. And then the third generation moved down even further onto the brook and had a mill there. And eventually the road winds around that mill site, since that was where the traffic was going in later generations. But again, an idea of how the road had changed over the years.
Boy, authentic outfit.
My name is Eileen Clem. I was born in a resident of Crown Point, New York, and now living in Claremont, New Hampshire.
And you are dressed in kit today.
Except for the have to save the feet. In genealogy records, on both sides of my family, my mother was a Dudley, and they originally came from Massachusetts, and the Dudley history documents that they did travel the Crown Point Road. On my father's side, whose mother was a Spalding, there is also documentation regarding that the Spaldings traveled the Crown Point Road to get to New York State. So I had both sides of my family ended up in Crown Point, and it's just very interesting to know that my parents always wanted to join the Crown Point Road Association, and for some reason never did it, but I was able to. I joined about 10 years ago, and I'm a lifetime member, and it's just all very exciting to go from where I started to where I ended up in New Hampshire. It's just a great thing to be part of this organization. Those must be Swiss. Guys.
Well, farmers that settled here along the Crown Point Road.
Let's look in the west.
So that's Teignmouth area, you think?
No, that's more Wallingford. We're roughly here on the town line. We are looking west. I think the big mountain in the background, I think, is Bald Mountain here outside of Wallingford, and then there's a smaller peak to the right of that, which I think is Granite Hill, which is up in Cuttingsville Village in the town of Shrewsbury. So if you want to swing around, you can see those maybe.
There.
Yeah, I don't think we're seeing such as far south as they could be, but I could be wrong.
What are you getting now?
We've crossed from Shrewsbury into the town of Mount Holly. We're at Crown Point Road marker 34B, which was placed by the Crown Point Road Association in 1995. And it reads Crown Point Road, built by General Amherst, 1759-1760, passed near this site, marked by CPRA 1995. And again, the reason they know it passed near this site was because of that corner we talked about earlier on the surveys and the reference to the road in the surveys. We saw yesterday some of the real old markers used in the 60s by the Crown Point Road before it had any association, before it had any money. Now that we've collected a little money over the years, we bought a few, and we've been trying to place a marker just about every year, Jim, isn't that right?
We had a bunch because the man who carved that first bunch for us, we bought 10, I believe, or 12, because it was cheap to buy the granite. He said, buy them ahead.
Cheaper by the dozen.
He went out of business. So we got them all to my house, and as they go, we have one left.
It just says 34B.
So it's a race to the finish. Which one of us will get hit by the bus first? We get a marker.
It's got to be a fort number for a bust, you guys, or something like that.
Peas and carrots.
Peas and carrots, peas and carrots. Come on.
Goober peas.
What marker is this again? I can't see it through the little lens. All right.
We need to go east, which is along the power line, and we'll have to decide whether to follow the power line or follow the road around.
That's selfish.
I think it should be a group vote or a group consensus, just because neither is perfectly right.
Yeah.
The power line will give you probably more expansive views.
It's a more direct route.
It's shorter. It might be a tad hotter though. I'm not promising. The road may open up.
It looks
too.
like it's in the sun.
Yeah,
Pretty a lot.
I think you'll be much more in the sun, but we don't know that the road won't start going.
Because the views aren't that great, there's so much haze.
Yeah.
Yeah. We may be better advised just to stay on the road, which is another.
Pretty nice on the roads.
Yeah.
Yeah, and we could cut through on the power line to save us doing that, which is, is just a little savings. Probably not a lot. Can you get that? Are you there?
Yeah, I'm there.
So this is where we're going to finish for the day, up here at halfway encampment. And we are right here now, and we were discussing whether to cut through on this power line, which sounds like people have decided it might be a tad too hot if you look out there in the sun from our beautiful shady spot we're in. What temperature, just to give people an idea? Are we in the high 80s right now?
Barb is our temperature person.
I'm guessing we're probably at least 85.
You think so?
No? 79, so I was way off. Yesterday it kept
Of
surprising
course, she's
me.
going to stand in the sun for a few minutes.
Yeah, and then it's gonna go, yeah. In the sun, it's way out there.
Puffing up. It's a big hill.
No, I live in Hartland. We thought we should eat lunch since we're almost done.
Goes to Otter Creek, everything goes to the Black River.
We did that hike, I think
So, is it up that high?
2, 3, 4.
I didn't know if it was below.
when you go that other road, you're going to go.
It'd have to be
Really, as
east.
soon as you get over that rise, you're going the other way, and Lake Nineveh drains it.
The Black River.
Oh,
I ended up with the best spoon that I ever returned. I had a little etching Mount Holly Grange on it when the Grange folded.
Oh, your flowers are beautiful. What kinds are those tall yellow ones? Those are
Oh, cool. Of course. You were saying that the other day. Yeah.
Boy, how beautiful those are.
And you can eat them. All the roots, anyway.
Well, we're now nearing the Kyle Perry Road, about a mile from our end of the day today. To my right, which is to the west, is the power line that we talked about hiking over earlier. Over that ridge, because we would have been in the sun, we decided to take the road and stay in the shade. We might have saved a little time this way, but I think the party is glad we stayed in the shade.
we're happier.
Yes.
Well, we're back to a nice road here.
You've been down here, have you?
No,
it's
no,
a beautiful,
so-
it's a beautiful
So this is
valley.
my new territory
Oh,
for
good,
today.
good.
And this is
You
where,
didn't take a wrong turn and come up
no,
here.
no. And this is where, who's the guy that we're heading for?
Well, this is Kyle Perry. This is the Kyle Perry Road, and Kyle Perry and his wife farm here. The family's been here for a number of generations. I can't remember exactly how far back it goes.
There,
Excavation, look at that.
okay. So that's what, there's our Crown
Crown
Point.
Point Road.
Here we are, Crown Point hikers.
Crown Point excavation.
We're in the right location.
Yeah. But we're not in Springfield. Yeah, well, we'll get a better view of them.
Is this the Kyle Perry farm?
Yes. Yeah, we're continuing our approach to Kyle Perry's farm. The halfway encampment, as I understand it, is on that rise, the field that's mowed to the left of the farm, to the left of the silo. Up on the hill is where the encampment was, and again was not just built in 1759, but was used for by the Native Americans for undoubtedly generations before that, and a number of artifacts confirming that have been found at the site over the years. The hill behind the Kyle Perry farm is called Proctor Hill, and it was named for Silas Proctor, who was one of the first settlers in this area. Lake Nineveh is over that ridge to the south of that mountain, and Silas Proctor settled there following the Revolutionary War. The encampment was used. The 1759 road would have gone to the right of this mountain, continuing down toward the Ludlow area. In 1776, the roads cut through from Plymouth, which was more directly behind that silo. As nearly as we can tell from studying maps, the road at that point still continued by Lake Nineveh, which is behind Proctor Hill, and then looped around to our right to get to this encampment. And ultimately, by 1800, as we mentioned earlier, the folks decided wasn't necessary to come this far south, and so the road around 1800 ran along that ridge to the left of Proctor Hill, past Saltash, which we'll see now, and then continued past Saltash into Shrewsbury and Shrewsbury Center, where we started our day today. As I was preparing a hike in this area a few years ago, I tried to do a little research on Silas Proctor, who settled here after the Revolutionary War. And I was trying to find out if he was had fought in the Revolutionary War. What I was learned was that he did not, but he was from a village in Massachusetts, and the name escapes me, so I won't try to, I won't misspeak, but as you may recall, following the Revolutionary War, after the Fort Ticonderoga was taken in 1775, during the summer of 1776, it was determined that the colonial army should have a navy on Lake Champlain, because they anticipated the British would come down Lake Champlain with their own fleet, which they did. Benedict Arnold was trying to get people to build ships in what was then Skeensboro, now Whitehall, New York, and there were some built there, and they were built out of green wood. Arnold was concerned that there were not professional shipbuilders in the area, and I sent out and said he would get some shipbuilders up and be willing to pay them good wages. And so a number of men from this Massachusetts village came up in 1776 to build Benedict Arnold's navy on Lake Champlain. And then after the war, many of them settled between here and through Cavendish and down in that area. There are a number of early settlers who all came up here during the war as shipbuilders and then settled along the Crown Point Road.
That would be quite a history, to be shipbuilders in Vermont.
Yes. Whitehall claims it's the birthplace of the U.S. Navy, and people always ask, how could that be? But there was the need for it there to try to keep the British from coming down, and Arnold did stall them off in 1776. They did finally overrun the Navy and Fort Ticonderoga in 1777, but those ships bought the colonial forces an extra year, and that very well may have helped the cause and led to the victory at the Battle of Saratoga later, 1777.
Gorgeous.
Yes, it was gorgeous. The Crown Point Road essentially went along two watersheds, one draining into Otter Creek, which flowed north into Lake Champlain, and then on the other side of the Green Mountains, water which drained into the Black River and flowed down to Springfield and Port Number 4. We're very close here to approaching the watershed. The water we're looking at right now, and on this side of the Kyle Perry farm, is flowing to the west and will drain into Otter Creek. But when we get to the other side of the rise here, from the other side of the hill, that water starts draining down into the Black River ponds and Black River and down to Springfield. So this is why one of the reasons they called it the halfway encampment.
Farmers are always busy.
Coming in last year that was pretty good. Now it's got to be a
Maybe I could try to make a little pillow.
That's maybe
1776, 1777 halfway encampment on the Crown Point Military Road was located 1/3 of a mile to the east. This is marker number 34A, placed in 2004 by the Crown Point Road Association in memory of Martin Howe. And we were just talking about Martin Howe. He was actually the first president of the Crown Point Road Association, and I believe he grew up in this area, and there's a family cemetery that we'll be going and looking at here in a little bit. But the halfway encampment, supposedly halfway between Crown Point and Fort Number 4, is located just on the hill up here.
What number is this?
34A.
And we started at 64.
Yeah.
How many A's and B's?
Oh, tons of them.
So
We're halfway.
In Shoreham
we're
Bridgeport.
halfway.
Well, by the markers we are.
I guess that's the direction we're going now. Stone wall.
Oh, there was one.
Avalanche?
There's one here also.
Oh, they got the fingers. My wife loves those.
Pointing to heaven.
Yep.
Wow, nice.
Oh, it's got a finger. It's the finger one.
Going up to heaven.
Yeah.
Jefferson was 61 years. July 1865 she died, and she died 1866, so she died a year later. So this is Henry. Died 1856. He died before they did. And that stone looks better than those, in better shape. Unless it was done later.
I wonder if it was lying down.
Can you read what's at the bottom there? For the video?
Brother, thou art gone to rest. Thine is an early tomb. But Jesus
Summoned
thee away. Thy Savior called thee home. Thy passion spirit gently fled, sustained by grace. Grace.
Oh.
And I'm not a poet, so I have no idea how that ends.
Have to dig it out.
So he was
21
21.
years old.
So this one says,
What is this? This is a little plug or something?
oh, to hold it onto that tree? But the tree's going to rot.
No, it's not.
I think, I wonder if there was a picture,
Yeah, it must be
Oh,
tucked behind it.
like a picture of
Picture or something for a separate carving?
Now, is that daughter of
Daughter of, yeah.
W.E. and
R.J.
R.J. Knight?
died September 15th, 1868, it looks like.
Yep.
Age,
age,
age, 2 years it looks like.
They had a rough time of losing people.
We're up on the rise at the Martin Cemetery, behind the halfway encampment. We're looking down into a shallow area. My memory is that there's some water down there, and my memory is that that starts flowing east to the Black River. So we are at the watershed here at the halfway encampment. Water on that side of this rise is flowing toward the Otter Creek, up to Lake Champlain and into Canada. Water on this side of the rise is flowing down into the Black River ponds, into the Black River, down to Springfield, Vermont, and the Connecticut River and south. So we're at the watershed here.
And this cemetery was right on the top of it.
Yep. So here we are again. We think in the foreground is the high ground where the halfway encampment was. And to the south beyond that, you can see, first of all, Proctor Hill, but beyond that, Ludlow Mountain, where Okemo is. So that's the view from here looking south. Again, very pleasant.
Nice breeze.
Yeah. We're looking here to the west from the vicinity of the halfway encampment. And my guess is those are Taconic Mountains on the far side of Otter Creek. Here's again the view. We're at the top of the hill where we think the halfway encampment was, and I suppose if one of your reasons for wanting to camp here would be to have a look out of people approaching, you can see how they would have had a good view in most all directions. Of course, we don't know how cleared or uncleared it was at the time. It would be hard to sneak up on you if you were up here on this ride. There is some supply of water not far to our east in that little creek we saw earlier, where we're looking now.
This is our day to the halfway encampment, which means we should be halfway done the walk, and we're hoping we're a lot more than halfway done. By miles it seems like we are, but we'll let you know next week. We walked from Shrewsbury Center to Kyle Perry's farm up here in the hills. Group went in and viewed the old Martin Cemetery. When we met Kyle this morning, he said we could camp up on a hill that she can swing around after. It's the most beautiful spot. In Kyle's wonderful Vermont laconic way, he said, yeah, maybe up on that hill, and maybe it'll be scenic. I think it will. So it was a great walk. We had our biggest day ever of people. We had 10.
Yep.
10 walkers, which breaks all our records. And we did it fast.
And Jim, you want to say we walked 14,658 steps?
7 miles.
So there you go. About 15,000 steps from this morning to now. Not bad, not a bad day. Perfect day. Perfect day in August.
Especially in the shade.
In the shade.
The breeze.
We're done early. Jim and I were hoping, since we're at halfway encampment, which has been known to be a place that a lot of people stopped on their way across the road, we were hoping, since we got metal detectors and all sorts of our gadgets and tapes and maps and GPSs, that we might go out in the fields and do some more work where we've never had luck before. Right now we have a technical breakdown, so maybe we're not going to. If not, we're going to have to relax all afternoon.
Oh, darn.
What a shame.
The walk's been beyond all our expectations in both beauty and the amazing people we've met and the great companionship along the trail. Just, we've all had a ball, I think, and it's really going to be sad to see it end. We might just have to find another road just to keep walking.
And what's the mileage to here?
The story is the Crown Point Road's 77 miles. We're not changing it, even if it turns out it's a tad more.
Yes, now that you're with a video camera, remember.
She always says, will you do that again? So. Take 2.
We're shooting pictures.
And Brooke has been walking with us, and I grabbed the birch bark, she had the matches, and he had the kindling, and I mean, that's how bad it was. It was like we went whoomp, 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 and had to have a fire because you just can't stop. I mean,
We had a smudge pot, and I have a picture of Jim. You can't even see him. The smoke's so thick, and we're standing right in the middle of it.
yeah, it's like you couldn't, you can't put your mouth, you can't breathe with your mouth when you're, because they go right down it. It's we're going into a dead zone that it kind of bothers us, because the way we stay in communication with anyone that wants to join us is either through pager or cell phone, and we're going into a dead zone. And the Verizon commercial is the guy checks into this really scary hotel, really scary clerk saying, Hey, we're going into a dead zone. You sure you want to sign in? And the guy goes, yeah, I got my people, and all the Verizon people are behind him. And the guy goes, oh, and he said, the towels are scratchy. This is my pager number, so I've been kind of passing it, saying, that's what I said yesterday. Oh no, it was somebody else.
We decided not to give it to you, George.
Yeah, if you want to find us at any time, my pager number, ask me at the end of the day, I'll write it down for you. So you can always pay us.
Here comes George. He's going to the woods.
We can't get you right away. Usually
But he's got water for us.
He called us a half hour
And then
ago.
when he can, he'll call you back.
So it's been a nice way because pages work everywhere.
That much different, you know?
So Horton, Hortonville, and all that. Somehow those names.
I wonder.
He just said Horton,
Holton.
Holton. Okay.
Yeah.
See, I changed it to Horton in my. So
History
be really
changes.
careful when I tell you anything.
We're in Holtonville.
The roofers are here.
Let's tell that story on camera.
Okay. Yesterday morning we pull in and. I always look like this, and so I always guess I do look like a roofer. Once a roofer, you can't change. So we pull into the Storo farm pretty early to set trucks. No, Shero. I said Storo again, so they are the Sheros. I apologize. You'll always be the Storos to me. So we pull in they didn't realize we set trucks early, so they didn't know we were going to be coming in. I think we had 3 pickups. Mine still has a ladder on it, but I mean, I just can't take a ladder off my truck because you take it off and you need it. So we pulled in rattling and screaming and pulled up in front of the farmhouse, and I hopped out to say, where can we leave the trucks? And we hear from inside, the roofers are here! And so I said, that's the only way you could be in agriculture, that you're a farm wife that somehow has a farm in Vermont and on a Sunday morning believe that the roofers are going to come on a Sunday morning, I mean, much less a Monday morning. So anyway, that's our call from now on. The roofers are here.
That's the best side, though.
That's right. Okay, now you can hike past me and then I'll be at the end again.
Here's Marita at the halfway encampment.
Oh, the wind! Wind in my face. The Crown Point Road hiker.
You've made it to the halfway encampment.
That's right, I sure did, with a gorgeous view.
Yes, it is.
The hills are alive with the sound of music. What a hike! What a day!